Hi, Evan.
What are we talking about today, Nathan?
Today we're going to talk about an integral part to some D&D players and the least important part to others.
Sure.
Backstory.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So, quick little definition. Backstory is the kind of creation story, the background story of any character that you have made.
Yep.
Frequently, DMs will ask for this at session 1 or 0. Kind of little rundown of your basic life in the background. It's a way that for you to know your character as well as everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And today we're going to be discussing various points of it.
Take it away.
Well, firstly, we're just going to talk about what should a backstory look like? And this is one of the hardest questions to answer because it's really going to be dependent on the person. I have always kind of kept mine shorter.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that I don't put in a lot of detail, but I tend to let my characters try and make their own story.
Okay.
That being said...
You've also fallen into the trap of Mordock,
yeah,
who has bathed in the blood of his enemies.
I've never been quite that far, but I personally have never written the 8-page epic backstory.
Yeah, no.
But I know a lot of people that have.
Oh boy.
And I mean, it's fun.
Yeah.
But at that point, you're not really playing D&D. You're writing down a fantasy novel.
I think it's okay to do that.
As do I.
If you're rolling a character that's 10th level.
Yeah, that's not level 1.
Yeah.
You're
level 1, you haven't done shit.
you
have 10 hit points.
Yeah, you've definitely lived a life, but
you have 14 hit points max.
Most of your backstory is going to be oh, I was a farmer.
Yeah.
And then my parents got killed from a dragon and everyone I loved died and now I turned to the dark side.
Well, that's fine because you haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
If that just happened.
And then, yeah, now you call yourself the Dragon Slayer.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, in seriousness though, backstories, they're important. They're a good building block for you. They're a way to set up what your character would know, what it's interested in,
what its goals are.
Goals, various relationships that they would have.
Yep.
So there's this lovely Reddit user by the name of Jim Baby, fantastic, who about 8 months ago posted something called Knife Theory. And I'm just going to do a little quote from this post real quick.
Yeah, because I haven't heard about this at all.
So, when writing a character's backstory, it's important to include a certain number of knives. And I put air quotes around knives because you can't see it, but they're there. Knives are essentially anything that the DM can use to raise the stakes of a situation for your character. Anything that can make a conflict personal, like a threatened loved one or the appearance of a sudden enemy. They're called knives because the players lovingly forge them and present them to the DM so that the DM can use them and stab the player over and over again.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, that last sentence aside, this is actually a really smart way of thinking about storytelling because, as our DM, Adrian, loves to say all the time, D&D is group storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you introduce your character to this world, you're supposed to give everyone else the kind of the concept of what it is, what its goals, what its ideals are, and then you can all build on that together.
Yeah.
So, again, Jim Baby,
fantastic username.
Just a fantastic new username. Suggests that each backstory should have around 6 to 8 knives. Anything less than 3 or 4 and your character's boring, and anything more than 15 and that's just
that's
whoa,
excessive.
Calm down. Yeah. So some example knives, quote unquote, a phobia or trauma your character experiences or has experienced, a mystery in your character's life, unexplained powers, unknown parents, a preset enemy your character has, an ongoing obligation or loyalty your character has, a favorite item / heirloom, a secret you're keeping, any sort of discrimination either against or for. All of these are essentially just personality points. And for each one that you have, your character becomes more and more developed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say, like, I feel like we've kind of been harping on the person who has, like, too much backstory. And I think that it's fine to have a very thorough, detailed backstory, which you can, like, work with DMs, you know, set up what town you're from, your parents' names, who you know, what job you've done. But what you were saying earlier is right, is that most people are going to be starting from levels 1 through 3.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, level 1, you're, like, not much better than a field hand.
Yeah, literally.
And so you can have a very intricate backstory, but I feel like people confuse intricacy with, like, quote-unquote epicness, or, like, power level, which they're two very different things.
Yeah. You can have accomplishments without having single-handedly destroyed a town.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. Like, a level 1, you could still be, like, a master-level forger.
Yeah.
Smithy.
Forger?
Smithy?
Blacksmith?
Blacksmith. Yikes. English is hard. Because that's like an ability you have more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. A proficiency, if you will.
Oh, nice mechanical tie-in to the game rules. Wow. As well as backstory can be something... Geez, sorry, that was an awful sentence. Sometimes you write a backstory for a character, and sometimes you write a character, or you make a character for a backstory. Yeah. And I think that those two things... Yeah. So, in the case of the character I'm currently playing, I had a backstory that I made a character for.
Okay.
And not the other way around.
Okay.
So I had this idea of a miner who was a wizard because they were, like, so inept at mining that they couldn't do anything with their body, so they had to do it all with their mind.
Right.
And then, as I've talked about, I think we've already released this episode. If we haven't... Anyways, no. So I'm playing a character called Giblet.
Yes.
Who is a...
Yes, we talked about this.
Who is a gnomish wizard.
Yes.
Who was raised by dwarves in a mine. And because he could never do anything to help the mines physically, he took up the art of arcane knowledge. And so he has a very small ragtag book, if you can even call it that. It's essentially just scraps of leather and paper with arcane runes scrawled on top of them. And that is an example of me creating a character from a backstory that I had and not the other way around.
I use that example of Giblet a lot when I'm telling people about, like, make your backstory cool, or like this. Here's an example of a sweet backstory my buddy made.
Oh, well, thank you.
Where, like, so we'll do a full episode about this, but, like, role playing through your spell book.
Yes.
Because of Giblet's, he took up magic specifically for mining.
Yep.
Every spell that Giblet had in his spell book at first level was applicable in a mining situation. Yeah, I really had to justify, like, Shatter, Tensor's floating disc, grease.
Grease. Well, you gotta. When the mine carts get rusty and stuck, you grease them right up again.
That's right, and they're good as new.
I told my DM that, and he was like, "Oh, cool." And then I was like, "No, you have to listen to every justification I made for every spell." And these are the kind of, like, even before going into the game, I knew what goals this character had, and I knew that because I was in touch with its backstory. Another good way of thinking of a backstory is, like, if you saw the pilot episode of a television show, or of, like, the first 20 minutes of a movie, and you were introduced with a main character, what would you need to know about that main character? So sometimes you can, purposely keep things a little vague, slowly kind of let them be discovered throughout the course of your playing, and that's fine. I'm not trying to say that you need to tell everyone your deepest, darkest secrets all the way, but a backstory serves as a way for you and your other players at the table to understand who your character is. And it's super useful in role-playing scenarios where your character has to make a decision, because there's a big difference between the decisions that Nathan would make playing at the table and the decisions that Giblet would make in the game and in the fantasy. And I think that using the backstory as a reference is helpful.
Yeah.
I also think backstory is where you can find things like flaws, personality traits, quirks, Bonds, I think the
Bonds,
5th edition.
yeah.
I don't know. I tend to not use those.
Yeah.
Like, I don't ever write down like.
Those are like the horoscope of.
Yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. It's funny that you give that example of Giblet being a character that you had written the story for first, because in the campaign we're a part of, my characher, I didn't write
the exact opposite.
I didn't write their backstory until
for like 6 weeks.
Yeah, I think we played like 6 or 7 sessions, and this character was literally just a rogue with a crossbow. Yeah. That was her entire identity.
For the entirety of the weeks that Evan didn't have a backstory, we always joked around, I was raised by crossbows.
That's right. I'm 3 crossbows and a trench coat.
And see, Evan is an example of someone, at least for this character, who you valued your character's backstory,
mm-hmm.
but you didn't have it right away.
No.
And that's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you even said yourself, sometimes, like, you didn't know how you would feel in certain scenarios
mm-hmm.
because you didn't know what kind of experiences your character had previously.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And these backstories, these, like, points, this is where that helps.
Yeah.
Like, your whole goal as a D&D character, I mean, most of the time people have pretty clear-cut goals, right? Like, save the princess, kill the dragon, avenge your dead father,
yep.
whatever you want. And this is where you get them from, is from your backstory.
Yeah.
Now, there are fun things you can do with backstory with other people. You can make joint backstories. So perhaps you and someone else were brother and sister.
Sure.
For all the listeners of this who watched Critical Role, Vex and Vax, they were brother and sister, they were brought up together, so they already had this inter-party dynamic where they would, give each other, like, wedgies and, like riff off of each other because that was set up for them already. So, at least for me, at the beginning, when a new group forms, there's always this sort of, like, awkward tension where nobody really knows how other people are gonna play, and you can just get rid of that sometimes. If everyone at session 0 is like, okay, we met doing guarding a caravan together,
mm-hmm.
we've been traveling ever since, and then we stopped at a bar and we picked up this minstrel because he claimed himself proficient in the sword and the singing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these backstories, if they interweave with each other, can help to ease the kind of, like, role-playing tension that I think a lot of people suffer from.
Yeah. Something I always find helps is when I'm gearing up to start DMing a campaign,
mm-hmm.
is I'll go to my players and say, does it make sense for your character to already know the rest of your characters in your party?
Absolutely.
And if it does, then they can just discuss their characters outside of session.
Exactly.
Before it even begins, and
mm-hmm.
then they come to that session, all that awkwardness is gone, they've already done a roll call around the table.
Yep.
And it just really streamlines things.
And then this is where that idea of group storytelling comes in.
Yeah.
Because you as the DM have set this world before them, and they have already begun to populate it with their own actions, ideas, and people.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's another thing, there's nothing stopping you as a player from asking your DM, hey, I have this idea for insert nobility, NPC, trade merchant, anybody here, mm-hmm. because I would have known them in my backstory. Can you put them into the world, please?
Yeah.
And I think that any DM worth their salt will be able to find a easy place to slot it in. And all of a sudden, you now have a reason to be invested in this world.
Yeah.
And I think what these knives are talking about earlier. You have lovingly created something, and you have given it to your DM, and like they can use it to help you, or they can stab you in your back multiple times.
Yep.
So again, I'm taking Giblet for example. Giblet was an attempt to create a backstory that wasn't sad, because
it's so easy to be an edgelord.
It's so easy in D&D to fall into the trope of everyone I know and love is dead.
Yep.
I'm traveling the world to avenge their death. I'm angry. So
I am my own monster.
What I attempted to do with Giblet was create a story that was compelling and was emotional without being like edgelordy.
Okay.
So I mean, I did follow a trope where Giblets wasn't adopted. Like I said, he was taken in by dwarves. He didn't know what his real parents were.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one of the reasons that he left, was to find his parents. He
Yes.
wanted to see if they were around still, and they were. Like, they literally lived, like, 3-4 weeks away at the province over,
Yeah.
and they were farmers.
Yeah.
And it was really neat for me to be able to be like, they have had an impact in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They're, like, sheep farmers from this town. They have their own little reputation, and they're still alive.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't have to be. The DM totally could have said, like, oh, they were, they died of old age, or they were killed by, this evil person.
Yeah.
And if they were, all of a sudden I have a new goal.
Yeah.
My goal changed from meeting my parents to, like, investigating their death,
Mm-hmm.
or trying to, like, avenge them. And then instead, now I have some farmer parents
Mm-hmm.
who I try and send money to whenever I can, because they're my parents and I love them.
Yep.
And that's a great story. It's wholesome. It started off with, like, I don't know where my place is in the world. I know I don't fit in with these dwarves. What can I do with myself? To, I've found my family, and now I can help my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, again, an example of a story where, the red dragon didn't come and demolish my village, and I'm the only one alive because my mother sacrificed for me.
Yeah.
Which was essentially what my first character was, but we don't want to talk about that. So it doesn't always have to be, this kind of tropey backstory.
Yeah. I love that.
As do I.
I've come up with a lot of edgelords in my time.
That's okay.
I'm going to come right out and say it.
Yeah.
My very first D&D character was the furthest thing from an edgelord, and I can't even believe it.
Oh yeah, you're 4G.
He was just a blacksmith.
Happy, glow lucky.
He made his own backstory during the campaign.
And that's another thing, like, the whole point of a backstory is not how much it's supposed to give you a point to go off of.
Yes.
Like, you are not defined by your backstory, you are defined by your actions, but
Absolutely.
this is supposed to be a guide to help you make those decisions and those actions.
And, like, obviously that character did have, like, a backstory of how he was driven from his home when some Duragar moved in.
Okay, yeah.
But he was just on an adventure. That was his tale.
Yeah. And that's like a good detail to have, because now at any point your DM can, like, leak you some information about a Duragar, like, infestation somewhere.
Yep.
And I would almost, like, instantly say, I would bet that you're instantly going there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like, and so this is, like, it's this sense of investment that you already have in the world that really helps you connect and get in with your character.
Yeah.
Now, I think that we should talk about something that I feel has happened before to people. The amnesia.
Oh.
I woke up one day and I don't know who I am or how I got these powers.
Never do that.
Okay. Well, okay, hold on. Whoa.
It's
I'm not gonna
never
say
okay to do that.
I'm not gonna say never, but if you want to do that, I think you need to tell your DM way beforehand.
Yep.
And I think that you need to be
Yep.
fully okay with whatever they make for you.
That is so much work for your DM.
So yeah, that is a lot of work for the DM, but you cannot complain.
Yeah, no.
Because you have fully said,
You get what you're
I
dealt.
don't know what my character is, or I don't care enough to make it, whatever your reasoning is.
Yep.
Or you have so much faith in your DM, but if they make something that you don't agree with, you don't have the grounds to stand on. And, I mean, obviously you can, like, talk to them after and say, like, hey, I don't really like the way this is going, and then, because you're both adults, hopefully you'll be able to talk to each other about it. But, at the same time, if you tell your DM, I am a blank sheet, write in me whatever you feel like, and then you get mad because you don't like what he wrote in, then you should have written it in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you do really want to try the blank slate backstory, you have to, I would say, know your DM well, and have been playing with them before.
You are really asking a lot of your DM if you go.
And you are asking a lot, yeah. I had a campaign where I played with my friend David, and he let his character be some dude who woke up in the middle of the street and his DM essentially gave him an anime backstory where he inherited a sword made from his ancestors hundreds of years ago, and he was this like martial arts master. And every now and again, when my DM would say something, David would just like look at me and be like, "Okay," and like these things happen.
Yep.
Which is why I would say probably don't.
It's such a risk.
It's such a risk. If it pays off, it's going to be great. It's going to be one of these things, wow, like my DM just knew what I wanted and he made that. But if you know kind of what you want in the first place, just make it anyways.
Just flesh it out. Just take the extra step and just flesh out your backstory.
Even a paragraph saying, I'm from here, these are my parents, this is why I'm in the adventuring world.
It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
It's not. So that is my rant about backstory. I love them. I think they're critical to the game. Oh, actually, you know what? Before we go, I think we should touch on a note. They're not necessary.
No, they're not.
You can just sit down.
Sometimes you can do, like I did, like I had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, with Jin.
You figure it out as you go along.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's different than being having an amnesia patient.
Yeah.
Like there's something to be said about showing up, playing the game, and seeing where your character goes compared to like purposefully like not even knowing your own name.
Yeah. And that was a little bit of a different situation as well, because I had come into that campaign later.
That is true.
Than it had started, and actually took over the role of one of the PCs.
Yes.
And so Adrian had set them up as like a master of disguise.
Yeah.
So I had to like then think like, oh, why would this rogue be a master of disguise? Are they hiding from something? Are they trying to cover up something of their past?
Yeah. And that's a great way. Again, if you talk to your DM and they have some like NPCs planned or some vague backstories and you like the sound of it, there's no reason why you can't be like, hey, do you mind if I become that person?
Yeah.
And then, like, obviously, if they were, like, the town mayor or something,
yeah,
you probably shouldn't be playing them.
Yeah, no.
But if you enjoy their backstory and their ideas, there's no reason that you can't say, would you mind when I play that? And then all the DM has to do is change some names and, all of a sudden their new town mayor is somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So I think backstory is really good if every player has one or is willing to put forward one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it doesn't need to be something that's, 8 pages long, but if you want it to be, that's fine, as long as you, again, don't confuse, intricate details with, fantasy level storytelling.
Yeah.
Because you're probably not, Moldak, drinker of blood, leveler of mountains. You're probably Tim, blacksmith, father of two.
Right. Father of two.
But yeah, that's basically my spiel of backstory. If you haven't, I would recommend reading the post about knife theory. We'll probably include a link to that in the description if you're listening on YouTube. And if you're listening via any other service, just Google Knife Theory D&D, and it'll probably be the first one that shows up.
Yeah, we're on iTunes now.
We are on iTunes now.
And Google Play.
And Gplay, for all three of you that listen to podcasts on Google Play.
That's right.
And the one of you who has maybe stumbled across our podcast. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Wait, before we go.
Oh, before we go.
Do you have a backstory in your back pocket that you have not been able to use?
I have 6.
Do you want to share one before we go?
Sure. This was actually going to be one of the backup characters I have for this campaign.
Okay.
But now it's okay. So, I've really wanted to play... So, I dislike alignment in Dungeons & Dragons, but I've really wanted to play an evil character for a long time.
Right.
But I think people confuse playing an evil character and playing an asshole a lot.
Yes. Ugh.
I don't want to play an asshole.
Yeah, no.
I have created a fiend warlock who is essentially part of a mafia.
Okay.
And is a very strict set of rules and agreements, and all of their things are signed with blood contracts, but what they really are is essentially just pawns for devils.
Okay.
And then he would act as the mediator between the two of them.
Sure.
That's like kind of a vague. Like I have more description for it, but I
Yeah.
don't like really want to get into it that much.
Yeah. Don't
Because in case I ever
don't
do
spill
play
the
this
beans
character
too
with
much,
you, then
yeah.
like I don't want to. But yeah, like even that, like he's a lawful evil character.
Yep.
He fully believes in like a hierarchy and a set of rules.
Yep.
But not necessarily the one imposed on him by society.
Yep.
He has connections and relations to the world already, as well as like extraplanar ones.
Mhm.
So I know that I just bagged on people for having like too much like power in their
Mhm.
backstories. But I think that I can only justify him because he's a warlock.
Yeah.
So because he's already been like chosen for some reason
Mhm.
by this like power from beyond kind of thing.
Yeah.
This gives him the like ability, and he's still just a pawn.
Yeah.
Like he's nothing more. He might be like the equivalent of a small time gangster from like 1930s New York, but he's just a puppet on strings for some like demon from another plane kind of thing.
Okay.
But yeah, do you have any that you'd like to share? And by the way, if you're listening to this and you like the idea of that, feel free, steal it, please.
Yeah, go ahead. I do have an idea for a character.
Okay.
That's sort of based on, and I can't remember if I was telling you or Adrian about this, but in the campaign we're playing now, we a few sessions ago fought an enemy called the Lord of Snails. If you recall, fighting a giant slug.
Yes, you did tell me
at the bottom
about
of a dark dungeon, and I just had this idea pop into my head during that fight for a character that I would love to play, called the Lord of Slugs, who is a warlock, pledged himself to a Feywild.
We both sure like our warlocks.
It's almost like they're our favorite class or something. Pledged himself to a Feywild, or an archfey being that resides in like a swampy area of the Feywild.
Yep.
And all of this being's little pawns are lord of something swamp related.
Yeah.
So there'd be like, I don't know, like Lord of Toads and
Lord
like
of Flies.
Yeah, Lord of Worms.
Yeah.
And because we killed the Lord of Slugs.
Yes, our friend Pavel got a small medallion that he found.
That has the name Lord of Snails scrawled on it.
So now he's the Lord of Snails.
So I came up with this character whose only goal, no matter what campaign he gets played into, his only goal is to find Pavel Sunderwood.
Because he's the Lord of Snails,
yes.
and you're the Lord of Slugs.
And I've got to bring him back to my archfey.
You have to convert
patron.
him.
Yeah, exactly.
And see, that's in reference to the joint storytelling again.
Yeah.
You have now interwoven your backstory with a real occurrence in the world.
Yep.
And this is only something that can happen once you've been playing for a while and you have to introduce a new PC.
Yeah.
But this is like a super cool storytelling idea where you reference or throw back to an event or idea that's already happened, and then you make it your own.
Yeah.
And this is just like a super cool idea.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. It is neat. I would love to play that character. I have so many
you can always just kill off Jin on purpose.
But I love Jin.
Well, you just found your mammy.
Inquisitive rogues are...
Oh, they're cool.
Just way too radical.
They're super cool, but that's not for now.
No, that's not for now.
Well, thank you for listening to us rambling about backstory. We hope our insights have helped you in some way. And to all those people out there who say that the ancient dragon killed their family, maybe try something else for a change. Say that you're a farmer and you had a midlife crisis. Instead of buying a motorcycle, you went off and started adventuring.
Friggin' edgelords.